You're listening to Business Eye, sponsored by your local enterprise office in Dunleary Rathdown. Together, we're making it happen.
And welcome to another week of Business Eye. I don't know what to say this week. Last week, I said lockdown week. This week, we're going to say lockdown week number 55. It feels like that. But I honestly believe that if you have a good mindset, you'll get through this and you'll feel really good about yourself and the environment that you're in. I was speaking to Simon before the break and I sort of said, you know, there's a lot of people out there who are in fear or it's really getting to them at the moment, but it all really focuses on your mind. So look, everyone, if you are feeling that way, you know, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Feel positive and love yourself. That's all I can say, because if you don't, no one else will. No one else will indeed. We have a couple of great guests on today. First slot of the show, we're going to be talking about innovation and generating growth. So before we get into that, Simon, how are you? What's happening, my friend?
I'm good, Joe. And you're right. You're so right. You know, there's a lot of people who are struggling. And, you know, I like to say that everything passes, you know, bad stuff passes, good stuff passes as well. And I think we just need to hang in there. You know, we all need to hang in there and this too shall pass. So I just wanted to say that, you know, I think we are all in this together. Let's forget about political slogans. We're all in this together. So I'm looking forward to this chat as well. We've got two really wonderful guests and I know Susie very well, and it's great to see Mary. So
it's interesting you say that. Did Charles Haughey once say we're all in this together and tighten our belts many moons ago? But yes, one of our guests today is Mary Cronin. Mary specialises in development of circular and bio-based economics, and she works with SMEs and large organisations. 15 years of experience, she combines her expertise with innovation and design to create scaling opportunities. Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe. Delighted to be with you.
Thank you. And Simon.
Yeah, so it's great to see you, Mary. And our second guest, I've known for a while now, is Dr. Susie Mitchell, PhD. That's the full title. I know you as Susie. It's great to see you, Susie. So Susie lives in the UK. She runs you run a personal development corporate coaching consultancy. You're a psychoneurologist, professional coach, master practitioner in NLP. You're the author of Sat Nav for the Soul and the S Word. Plenty of work on radio, BBC Radio. You're a wonderful person as well. You know, Susie and I have collaborated a bit online, and you have a wonderful soul. So,
well, there we go. Four beautiful souls. We'll get into singing a song now, will we? Will we do a song? That's it. We could indeed. Welcome, folks. With the circumstances at the moment, and with, you know, innovation, which is very important, and we can see that there's so many innovative ideas after developing over the last 2 years, and with that comes communication, and with that comes the people that are surrounded, which is as well. So I'll open it up to yourselves. How do you see what's happened in 2020 and coming into 21, how innovation is growing within each of your sectors?
That's interesting. I can kick off, Joe. Thank you. That's a great question. So I guess one of the things that COVID has really thrown up is how dependent we are even on, for example, our supply chains. And you look at local versus global. And you look at where we're bringing our tomatoes from, transferring them halfway across the world, when in fact we could grow a lot of that produce ourselves, and we could grow it locally, and how we could move even from urban to regional, and what that would mean for people. It would mean local jobs. It would mean if we can set up regional hubs, and the Department of Energy and Department of Agri are doing great work in and around stimulating some of these ideas. And we know in countries like Denmark and in Nordic countries, thematic regional hubs work amazingly. So what that means is, for example, in Kerry, we could have a food hub. In the Midlands, the Bord-na-Mona regions, we could have a renewable energy hub. And the government, like the Department of Agri and Food, are doing a great job actually at the moment in looking to see how we can develop these. But what that means for people is, you know, the word innovation is a bit bandied around, and people talk about innovation, you know, and they use it as a word. It's a bit like disruption. I don't particularly like it. But what it means for people at a local level is that we can bring grow companies at a local level, create more jobs, create communities, even from a renewable aspect, reuse the waste that we're using. You know, we have all of this waste that has come out of the likes of restaurants and come out of our factories, and we're dumping it. And in fact, that could be turned into a revenue stream. And that's what circular economy is all about, and circular innovation.
Wow. And Susie, from a leadership, from the sort of clients that you work with, the leaders and how they communicate in organizations, I mean, how do you see them using this circuit breaker time to think and communicate differently and to, you know, perhaps innovate in the way they communicate and lead and inspire?
Well, I want to link it back to Mary, what she said. I think so many opportunities are coming out of this time. You know, it's the first time in history we've all had to pivot. We've all had to rethink our whole strategy. And even one of my clients are going into vertical farming to marry, you know, what you said, Mary, because the opportunity is going to be huge. Keep it local, you know, and regional rather than going global. And the whole habits of thinking, science, believe in, certainly from a leadership perspective with the clients I'm working with, they're really taking it so high to another level with ideas, with scaling, with innovation, that they've never ever had that time to think, because everybody's so busy in their lanes, as we all know, and nobody gets a chance, I know it's a cliche, to stop and smell the roses, literally, because they just think that that's the vein they've always done and they should stay in. It's a huge reset of opportunity.
Here's something, Mary, that someone spoke to me last year about renewable energy and growing, you say tomatoes. It's like the big data centers that we have and the energy that are in those data centers, that what's the possibility of all that open land that is usually around those data centers to funnel the heat from those data centers into greenhouses around the data centers that could then help grow vegetables all year round, or in climates that aren't used to growing them. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes, so there's a number of things there, and there's a lot happening in the renewable space and renewable energy, and we certainly have great opportunities in Ireland, especially in the Midlands. There's a new incubator opened up called the Cube, and I recently just spoke to them, and it's really to focus on how do we generate this renewable space. But I guess really, if we look at, we don't even need to go from when you're talking about growing all that in from a land aspect. There's vertical farming, but there's also the piece even around even reusing. We can grow new crops, but we can also reuse that waste. We can also take waste that's coming from even the likes of Google now are talking about the quantities of waste that they're, rather than sending it to landfill, they're sending it back into what we call anaerobic digesters. So in Ireland, we have a number of anaerobic digesters, and the way that works is you could take all your restaurant waste or the waste that comes from food in the likes of Google or Apple, and you can feed it into the anaerobic digester, and we create byproducts from that, and that's like biogas, and that goes back to degrade, and it's another form of energy. So in Germany, on all farms, they're reusing all of their waste, and it could be, for example, from the cattle or the animals, and it's fed into the anaerobic digester, and the waste is generated. We have a huge opportunity to do that here in Ireland, but we have legislation and some policy issues that's prohibiting us currently. So one of the things that we've been doing over the last 2 years is really looking at pulling people together, that from communities or from regions and from government and policymakers, and saying, look, we need to collaborate now more than ever, and people need to understand, you know, even some of the terminology, the difference between the circular economy and the bioeconomy or bio-based, the terminology used in climate, and what does it mean for us and how can we make it happen?
And Susie, Mary mentioned people there at the end, and how do you think, you know, companies and leaders should or maybe are starting to think about how they treat their people better, right? I mean, you know, for decades we were commuting for endless, you know, hours, and we had all these hierarchies, etc. Are you seeing any of your clients or at any companies now starting to think a bit differently and treating their people better?
Totally. They have to, you know, the old thinking is, as we said, it's in the past. It's, you have to come up with innovative ways of how you're going to scale and how you're going to grow your businesses. And I applaud Mary for going out and lobbying what you can do in Ireland, but I think we can all look at our own companies and see how can we be better? How can we get our companies, our businesses more sustainable through the people? And it is a shift in mindset. You know this, Simon, and I know this. It's definitely, we need to open up the mindset, but again, get guidance and mentoring, and definitely to think differently. And some people need to rejoin the rewiring again, because again, conditioning. I am such a big advocate that conditioning of the leadership team of an organization drives the team. If that has old-fashioned thinking, the whole organization is never going to be innovative. It's never going to move forward with leadership.
That's so interesting.
It's definite. And I see that, Joe, in all the companies, and I work in such a myriad of companies, all types. And it's the conditioning that, to me, in this change that we've had to pivot in the last year, that is the change. It's a conditioned mindset that does not know how to think again. And people like myself and Simon are going in to help these organizations rethink. Again, it's rewiring the brain. It absolutely is.
But that's it, Susie. If you think about it, everything then, is driven between purpose and meaning. When you go in to develop a new product or a new service, or, a new psyche within the industry. And we know that when we go into organizations, and the four of us will go into an organization and speak to staff members, and sometimes it's the mindset in the organization that needs to shift first before we can introduce the new technology, the new ideas. So how do you first find out where is the issue, and how do you direct that to move the company forward then as well, Susie?
Great question. I'm one of the strategies I use, I go in and I read the energy of an organization. So I go in for a week or so before I'm going to do some work, and I observe how people work together. What's their posture like, even walking the corridors? How do they interact with people? I'm looking at patterns. As a psychologist, I'm looking at patterns to see and test the measure of energy. We've been talking about renewable energy, but you've got to get the energy of the organization first. And I will see, I have scales that I measure it on, and then I show the evidence to the leadership team and say, these are the departments that either need to align better because they're so disconnected. Technology might not be speaking to the value chain, customer services might not respect sales, and all that comes into the mix. And you absolutely can change the whole energy of an organization, but you've got to know where you're at, exactly as you said.
You're like the secret shopper in the car dealership, popping in there.
But that's important. You use the word alignment, Susie, and I think it's all about alignment in organizations. You have to have the right people with the right drive and strategy and opportunities. And then Mary, from a technology perspective and the whole circular economy thing, I guess it all needs to be aligned as well. You need political will, you need the right technology. How does a country ensure that it's sufficiently aligned in all respects?
That's a great question. And just to pick up from where Susie left off there, the whole piece of growth mindset is part of all our programs. And even with talking to the government and Eamon Ryan and Patrick Barrett in DAFM and our regional hubs, trust is a key part of all of this. And along the lines, we'll take, for example, food, agri and bio-based products. With primary producers, you might be talking about farmers, fishers, foresters. Trust got lost along the way. And one of the things now to build the bioeconomy and to build the biocircular economy is trust needs to be built again in some of these regional hubs. And it's about collaboration and bringing people together and bringing key influencers together as well, and having people like Susie. And a lot of what we do within our organization is around the whole behavioral mindset change. And when we're going in, we're doing a program, we have to start with, like people around the table, there's a trust piece there, but also understanding that consumer behavior is changing. And for companies, say, for example, in the circular economy, legislation is changing from Europe, which means that in 18 months' time, 2 years' time, companies will be mandated to move from linear, which means that they're not treating their waste in any particular way, to circular, meaning that you're always thinking about dematerialization and end-of-life product. companies, our company, European companies, would be mandated to move circular. For some companies, that will be easy. For the companies who have a change mindset and can say, okay, you know, how do we do this? For other companies, they won't survive in that. And that's part of what we're talking to people about and saying, look, we've run this pathway to the circular economies purely to tell them about what's coming down the line, what's it mean for you, and what change we collectively need as a country as a whole.
But I think that's quite normal as well, that you have some companies that will thrive and companies that will move on, that won't be able to take up what's coming down the line. And, you know, that's part of the economics and a part of the structure on it. But are you finding that more old established companies are embracing this, or is it new companies that are coming through which are steering the charge?
Yeah, you know, there's a mix, Joe, and I guess it's kind of aligned to what Susie was saying earlier. You know, it's the people within the companies, and it's the people who's driving the companies, and it's the board, you know, or some boards think, you know, circular is just another fad. You know, whoever thought in COVID we could change and move this fast. So yes, companies like the Google and the Apple have lots of money to do their dematerialization and back and refurbish their goods and get all of those materials back. And other companies just don't have the bandwidth. You know, they're struggling to survive, and then to think about, you know, converting from linear to circular. But that's where government has to come in on this, and where we public and private partnership, people like Susie and the whole mindset, collaborative policy. It's big picture thinking, you know, like Amy and Ryan has been talking about it, Department of Energy and the climate action groups, and we talk about it, how we move from global to local. But we have to explain what global to local means, how we change our supply chains, how we think about how we buy our food and buy our food locally. And that whole trust element comes into it. So there's a number of factors there.
We've mentioned the mind and trust a lot. And Susie, you've written, you know, Sat Nav for the Soul. Does a company have a soul, right? And if it does, how does a company's soul manifest?
Oh, that's a great way of putting it. You know, my little book, I've written a couple of books, but, you know, it was about the individual, but I guess you scale it up into company. Every company has a soul. Every company has a heartbeat that resonates with the collective people in it. Absolutely. And it does start with thinking. Then it starts with all their values. You know, then it starts with how they align, how they live, how they act. So there's so much. Absolutely 100%, Simon. Companies have a soul.
I think it's communication at the end of the day, that if any company wants to survive or grab that idea of what's going on through lockdown, especially with how companies are evolving now, it's communication. And I think communication is more important today than it has been over the last couple of years, because we're all living in our little isolation boxes, looking at each other through these beautiful things called screens and feeling connected but isolated and disconnected at the same time. And I think it's crucial that in any large organization, small or whatever it may be, that the people need to, the higher level, the managers, the C-suite executives need to actually, even every day, have a 10-minute call with everybody every day, just to say, I'm here to support you. How are you getting on? I understand the situation you're in, and how can I help? And a lot of companies, I don't think, are doing that today.
Oh, no. And just to build on that, Joe, Mary, you mentioned trust, and there's a lot of leaders out there who seem to be saying things that they're not really painting the full picture, of the difficulties that people are facing, and they're sort of papering over this stuff. And Susie, from a corporate perspective, and maybe Mary, you can talk then from from your perspective. What's the best way for organizations to communicate that, honestly, that things are tough, right? But also at the same time give a message of hope. How do you do that? How do corporations do that?
Well, I think some of it, what Joe says, does start with communication, but people have to feel valued. There has been so much disconnect and disjointing within teams, within organizations. Otherwise, people like myself and Mary probably wouldn't go in, and both of you as well. We wouldn't go in to help do the alignment and help put pieces back together. But I really do think the value of businesses have changed. You said, does it have a heartbeat? Does it have a soul? Yes, but I think the values, people aren't living their values. They were just on a hamster wheel going through the motions. And then we have, a world crisis that is a wake-up call. We all realize that. And I love what Mary said earlier. We've had this opportunity to go faster and innovate at a higher level, that we've never, ever had time to breathe and think before. But it purely is, I think it comes back down to what Joe said. You've got to connect with the individual and then you take it to the collective. But people matter more than anything. It's really, how are you feeling, and checking in, and people having that open, trust, honest conversation, because so many people don't have honest conversations in business. They don't.
I think what it is, that people have to realize, especially as we're talking about innovation and we're talking about business growth, is that an organization now is a community. People have to understand that
Yes.
out of all our living day, if it's not for sleep, the rest of the time we spend thinking or living within the companies that we are with. And companies have to sort of say, okay, I'm no longer a company, I'm a community. And how do we help each person in the community? And, there's two things that's springing up for me, and it's for both of you in a way. It's for Mary, for you, it's, the investing, and Susie, for you, it's the education. How do we marry the two of them together to create value and innovation within an organization?
So investing in education. Yes, within an organization, if I could spread that out a little bit to say, even building something like our regional hubs from local to global. And I guess if you go back to even in investing, if you're talking about investing even from a financial aspect, investing, if we're building some of these hubs and we want to build our communities within our regional areas, SMEs don't have the finances at the moment to do that. So that's where the government kicks in. That's where policy kicks in. And that's where building community really matters. We've got to think, what's the bigger picture here? Where do we want to be in 5 years' time as regards our low carbon communities, our building our communities, jobs for people, and building up our local communities as well. So there's a part about public and private funding that needs to happen. There's also the policy change, and there's also the piece around, even in the pathway to circular economies, which we've been running at the moment, just help collaborating with people. And for me, building communities builds impact, and creating authentic, and I know it's a word that gets bandied around a lot, but authentic collaborations where we can connect. So it's about what Susie's talking about earlier. It's making connections with people. We can all call meetings and have, not terribly authentic that we used to have in our large corporates years ago, and that on our team building day out. But more authentic people need connections, and even at that local level, in our regional hubs. So we need to get back to the roots. There's nothing new about the circular economy. We all grew up in the circular economy, so this idea of community building, buying locally, reusing our waste, repairing, remanufacturing. So there's nothing new about it, but it's about connection, perhaps.
I think it is. I think it's being mindful of where you purchase, and I think we're all finding that at the moment. And Susie, that question to yourself.
Education, you're absolutely right, Joe. We don't know what we don't know. We hear that expression, but we've all grown up with our own conditioned thinking, totally. So this is why people like all of ourselves on this show here, that we all go into organizations to bring our years of wisdom to the table. People do need to collaborate, to use Mary's words again. Collaboration is key in this economy now, because we don't reach out to people who've had this collective wisdom and bring it into organizations. And anybody listening to your show here, Joe, it is about, never think that you alone have to change the world. Whatever lane we're in. It is about, we don't know what we don't know. We have to reach out and get educated from the people around us, from our connections, and really empower ourselves and therefore the rest of our organization through the people to get truly educated on what needs to happen. That education is
Joe, you and I need to start collaborating more, you know that.
I'll cut the grass and you can do the hedges.
I'll hold the ladder.
I'll do the washing up.
It's interesting when we're talking about collaboration, and I think one of the big issues, which is going to be sort of that Russell in innovation between Ireland and England, is Brexit, and the cost element now that has increased between the two countries when we're trading in between. I get very frustrated when even I was ordering something on Amazon there again, something for €200, and it was 45 quid to get it shipped to here. So I rang up my friend in the north. I'm getting it shipped to them, which is free, and then they'll just send it down for €5 to me. So, that's just something on small scale, but look at on a vast scale and the red tape. We're shipping stuff over to the UK, and it's going to take an extra week and a half to get it over than what it normally has happened as well. So all of innovation is great, but there's these small things, and Mary, you said it about getting the governments involved. There's small stuff that now is unthinkable that needs to be really corrected.
It's interesting on that. And Susie, I mean, there's going to come a time when the British government are going to have to fess up and say, the results of Brexit, right? And I'd imagine a lot of them are going to be negative, right? Just a hazard a guess. How do you think the government? Yeah. So how do you think the government may communicate this stuff, Susie? Say in 6 months, 12 months.
Very interesting. Don't get me started on Brexit, because however we all voted, it's affected. My son has a business over in Georgia near Russia and has products international, and everybody's been affected, as Joe said, by getting goods out. Even recently, Simon, with what happened between you and I, it's unbelievable the changes. But from the government in the UK point of view, personally, and we've all got opinions and don't shoot the messenger, the communication has been very average at the British government level. Put it.
They could just put everybody in prison.
Exactly. I wouldn't think maybe average is too kind a word, Joe, but honestly, whoever's advising them from a communication prospect is not doing the best job at all. And it's been shocking. It's sad to see. It is whatever your political view.
We need to give our governments a bit of coaching practice in NLP, not on a negative scale, but on the positive scale.
Where's the hope?
That's it. On it.
I went out running just quickly. I went out running yesterday, did some exercise, and this woman, I just walked along with my mask on. Normally we don't need with a mask on, and she jumped, and I said, "Oh, are you all right?" She said, "I'm so scared of people. I'm so scared." I said, "There's no need to be scared. I mean, where is the hope? Where is the hope?"
I'm scared of Rottweilers. That's probably about it. Just quickly before we go, give me 30 seconds each on R&D. There's a hard one. Where should they start their investment? Is it mind, body, spirit? Where should it be? Cash flow. 30 seconds.
Research and development. That's an interesting question. Okay, so there's a number of things: growth mindset, collaboration. It's a mix of new thinking, bringing people together in an agile way.
It all starts with the people. You're absolutely. We can have the best products, services, everything like that, but it all comes back to the individual and then the collective. So absolutely, R&D has got to be on educating people, on bringing people together, as Mary says, a collective. People.
Yeah. Susie, what's your website if people want to reach out to you?
It's susiemitchell.co.uk. So it's SUSIE Mitchell with 2 L's.co.uk.
And Mary?
Upthink.works, WORKS.
And Simon.
No, it was great. And I think what I got out of this was that I think we all need, society and companies, we all need to think two things. We need to think cohesive and inclusive growth. I think that those two words, cohesive, how do companies and societies become more cohesive, and at the same time more inclusive. And I think that's what I took out. I really enjoyed the chat. Both Mary and Susie, I think it was wonderful. Great.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Cheers.
yes, folks, we're going to take a quick break. And after the break, we're going to have 2 more guests, and we're talking about lockdown and reopening Ireland.
Sponsored by the Dún Laoghaire Rattown Local Enterprise Office. You're listening to Business Eye on Dublin South FM.
And welcome back to Business Eye. Yes, Simon, that was an interesting conversation we had in round 1. It was
it was great. It was great to get 2 perspectives, one from a kind of a government technology perspective, and then one from a leadership and business perspective. And it was all about cohesion and inclusion and growth. It was great.
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, we have an interesting second half to show. There's 2 people that have raised my eyebrows, and especially seeing what they're doing and flying that flag. And it's to do really about what it's looking like about opening up after lockdown. And as people know me, I'm very passionate about lockdown. I believe that we have to do a bit of lateral thinking. I think people have to start asking a lot of questions and seeing what can be done instead of listening to one narrative, as they say, and following it. I think people have to start thinking outside the box. So on that, we have Brian Winters. Brian is a qualified solicitor, and he's been pushing the reopen our pubs, and especially fighting about the insurance that the pubs, that loss of revenue, which has been colossal over the last couple of months as well. And then we have Conor Kelly. And Conor Kelly is connected to a UK branch of the Great Reopening, and that's about building a network of business owners, especially in the SME, who feel frustrated and want to open up their businesses again. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Simon. Thanks for having me.
So I'll open up the floor to yourself, Brian. Brian, what has the last 12 months been like for yourself and speaking to business owners right across the country?
Well, Joe, from my perspective, I'm a solicitor by profession, but I'm heavily involved in the hospitality sector, both here in Dublin and indeed down the country. And it's no great secret that the hospitality sector has been completely decimated. So you've seen people, who have spent their lives in the industry. It's some generational businesses, and it has in fact been a double hit. And what I mean by that is, your pension plan. If you had an aspiration of building up a business over 40 years, and your exit strategy was the sale of a pub or restaurant, that has been taken away from you. We've had a report commissioned whereby the valuations of pubs have more than halved. Couple that, it's been the perfect storm insofar as since March 15th, many businesses didn't see a gradual decline in their income. They saw a complete stop, halt, decimation of the revenue stream. Save Irish Pubs, what we are about relates, as you correctly say, there was a seminal judgment which I think has far-reaching consequences, not only for pubs, but for small business. And I would go so far to say why I started this initiative. I must make it very clear, it's not for profit. What we are encouraging is publicans to upload their policy to us, and they will be afforded the best advice. We've engaged McCann Fitzgerald Solicitors, the leading commercial firm. We've 3 senior counsels engaged, and we've a firm of loss assessors. And what drove me to those lengths was I'm in the very fortuitous position whereby the hospitality is not my mainstay income. But I have seen across Dublin the sheer decimation of business, not only exclusive to the pub industry, but the small barbers, the small hairdressers. You have a cohort of listeners there who only know too well. They don't need me to pontificate about how hard this has been. And I will come back to that when I made the point. But the conduct of the insurance industry in this era of corporate and social responsibility, where large corporates are, held accountable by their large institutional investors as to how they interact with society, their regard for the environment, etc., etc. The insurance industry have behaved at best with a belligerent view to small business, but at worst, a complete arrogance and disgrace in depriving people of valid claims. Now, what the insurance industry of Ireland will come out and tell you that we are a very heavily regulated body and we abide by the rules and regulations. But what they don't tell you is that if you are a small business, and in particular, I'll use the reference to a pub, what they will do is deny your claim in the first instance. And this has been a systematic approach by the industry. In Simon, this qualified legal person, they'll invite and invoke in the insurance policy to go to arbitration. If you, Joe, wish to go to arbitration, it's going to cost you between 100 to 150,000 euros, which is beyond the reach of most people. And the insurance companies actually knew that. So the idea of Save Irish Pubs was an initiative, and I must compliment Irish distillers. They were the only drinks industry that stepped up to the plate to provide meaningful assistance to customers. And of course, they have a vested interest insofar as this is their distribution network, but they have been a fantastic partner. And the whole idea is you upload a policy. I would love to come on your show saying that anyone that uploads their policy, we can guarantee them payment. That's not the case. But what you will get is a very fair crack at possibly a payout, which is the very lifeline to your industry.
I understand that there's the policies and, it's loading up all the paperwork and all, but it's really driving back to the frustration. And one of the things with when speaking to a lot of people as well, I'm understanding that some of them have just given up the fight. Some of them have now got to the stage that they've gone, I've lost the energy, I've lost the will, I can't continue this, I'm decimated on it. And the other thing as well is that you can look at the whole pub industry, and I hate using this term wet pubs. I refuse to use it because it is suddenly this made up word that's came along. These are family run businesses, and they're part of communities as well. I live in a small rural area outside Dublin, and the streets are empty. The place is just, the Christmas trees were put up for an extra month just to cheer people up. What is the psyche of that we are all feeling, or what people are feeling in small businesses?
Because as you know, Joe, I come from England originally, but I lived in Australia for 10 years, and I've been back here 4 years. And my biggest observation overriding everything, and I'll be careful not to get political here, is that I'm seeing other countries increasingly having quite sophisticated strategies to deal with this. Australia, New Zealand, Korea, Taiwan, China, even America has published an amazingly watertight strategy under the new Biden administration. And yet every time I hear politicians and policymakers, I'm not hearing a strategy. I'm hearing reaction. And it's like death by 1,000 cuts, right? And I've got a small business. So Brian and Connor, I mean, are you seeing the same? There seems to be so little certainty coming down from above compared to other countries. And my concern is that the average person is going to wake up and say, hang about, other countries are managing this in a sophisticated way. Why isn't our government?
Yeah, well, I haven't followed the strategy of other countries too closely, but one I would point towards is Sweden, whereby they've protected their vulnerable. They've kept businesses open, and they have a manageable and realistic strategy to living with COVID, not isolating from COVID, And one other is Florida from the USA. They've kind of like gone against the herd here and lifted all restrictions in September. And if you compare them to one of the most draconian states of the USA, which is California, I believe, they're doing better in every metric, whether it's deaths, hospitalizations, cases, and such. So I think we really need to take a measured approach instead of just constantly kicking the can down the road.
I think with what I'm finding, what I believe as well, it's only just my opinion that I think there's some bad management, and it's the bad management is lock everyone down and then let's deal that, because what will we do if we let everyone out? And I think there is some guidance and there's data out there that we should be able to look at now. But I just want to ask you, what is the mood from the people that you're speaking to? You're part of an organisation which is the Great Reopening, and there's, the momentum is building within Ireland, and it's a very large momentum in the UK as well. What is the development of it, and how is the momentum moving along within this country? And you're probably speaking to a lot of people on grassroots, the person that doesn't have a voice but owns the hairdresser, or the person that, that has that small shop that wants to open up, who can't afford to pay the bills. What are they saying to you?
Well, a lot of the businesses we've talked to so far, some of them have adapted in ways that they can, whether it's click and collect or deliveries and that, But the overwhelming theme is that these people's businesses are on the floor, During the beginning, when they were instructed to put up the plastic boards and encourage social distancing and on the various signs and stuff, they adapted to what the government told them, and then they were locked down anyway. So it's a lot of struggle. That's the kind of overarching thing that comes from it, is people are absolutely struggling, and I don't know how much more they're going to survive.
Yeah, and Brian, I mean, your campaign, I've mentioned the government before, but I don't know, so I'm asking the question, is the government supportive of it? To what extent are they supportive of this kind of activity, or are they not supportive? I don't know the answer, that's why I'm asking.
I think I have a certain sympathy for the government. I'm apolitical. I'll declare my hand on that. I think the reaction from the hospitality, you'll hear a lot of criticism that the responses have been inadequate. I tend to disagree. I found, the wage subsidy and the various grants, we're a small country with limited means. The big bugbear I have, and you're going to hear me constantly hark back, is the lack of righteousness, or the sense that the insurance companies, as to how they approached small business, was quite disgusting. On that note, just as a consequence of the FBD ruling, and it's very relevant to both Connor's organisation and indeed many of your listeners, which is outside of the pub realm, but we received in quite a cohort of policies from small barbers. And the company was iSure, which was a UK company that primarily insured small cafes, small hairdressers, and small barbers. And they have capitulated now. I commend organizations like Connors. I think it's very important, though, that when an insurance company makes that decision, that it's communicated to the wider community, because, and it's very much, the situation that, united, you're stronger, whereas, the insurance industry love this kind of disparate and people not knowing, the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing. In relation to the government response, there seems to be an element of organized chaos. I think, that certainty is required. And if that certainty is to take the guise of, you take, similar models like New Zealand, where they took the sharp pain at the outset. And, it's very easy, hindsight is the foresight of a fool. It's very easy to look back and say, we shouldn't have opened at Christmas, we shouldn't. But what you can do is you have a greater understanding now of how the virus is behaving. You have a greater understanding of areas that we have to be conscious of. The visiting houses and large gatherings is something that probably will not be on the horizon for 2021. But really and truly, should I be precluded from going in and having my hair cut? Back to Connor's point, where a small business has kind of that, it might be only sums of 2,000-3,000 in putting up the screens and protection, and then to be told, well, you're going to be closed anyway. I think there has to be, from a small business perspective, these grand statements of, we're doing this for the greater community. I think they have to get more granular. I think they have to understand, how the virus is behaving. And
I think the small business society said that when they looked at all, and we had them on there a couple of weeks ago, that they looked at all the barbers and all the hairdressers, and they went out of their way to protect themselves and protect their customers. And in all of these, the count of COVID or people that got COVID in these was yes, yeah. So why close them down? There's one thing that I feel, and I was saying to this Simon before the show, and I'll open up to yourself, Conor, this question as well. There's only so much that people can take before, the last straw that breaks the camel's back. Are you feeling that, or would you agree with that, or are you feeling that's what's happening within the small business the small business entrepreneurs that you're speaking to?
Absolutely. I think at a certain point, these people realize that they've got nothing to lose, or they've everything to lose if they don't open the doors and generate some kind of revenue, So I think it's a small momentum at the moment, but over time, I think you're going to see more and more of these small businesses just deciding that they either have to open their doors or they're going to close them permanently, So that's kind of one of our main goals, is to connect businesses who want to open with customers who want to support them.
And are you within that? Are people? I know some people who want to open their businesses, but their landlords are refusing to open up, to allowing them to open their business. Are you finding that that's one of the concerns?
I haven't heard much of that kind of concern specifically. It's more just fear of fines that people prevent them from opening their doors, or fear of government repercussions. So yeah.
Well, it's always been the government in Ireland, or the political system, has always frightened the Irish with large fines. That's what they've done for many years.
Yeah, I do get the sense, Joe, that, and I'm listening to the media all day long, that there seems to be a tipping point happening right now, and I think the government really is on a bit of a back foot right now, and particularly when we're seeing other countries accelerating the vaccination programs and managing this well. And you said it well, Brian, about, that kind of, there needs to be more granularity. It's very easy just to lock everything down. But, my local barbers in Churchtown, you've got to go through 4 levels of protection before you sit on your seat. I mean, you don't get that when you just talk to somebody in the street, So, Brian, how do you think how do we become more granular? How does the government do it? What needs to be done?
Well, I think a couple of points I'd say to that. I'm not a virologist, or I don't have a scientific background, but you alluded to the point that that the outbreaks are not happening in your local barber in Churchtown. It's kind of large gatherings in pubs and house parties and whatever. So the one thing I would like to see government being more like, and I'd be kind of an advocate that they have done their best with a very difficult scenario. But what I'd like to see is kind of from now going forward is be far more proactive in relation to look at the businesses from a debt profile, for instance. The banks are there. They have capital adequacy ratios to adhere to. They have given the holidays to businesses. But again, it's that uncertainty that's crippling businesses to think, if I owe, be it at 10,000 or do I owe £1 million, what's going to happen in 6 months' time? And I had a very interesting conversation with a colleague in relation to new examinership laws for small business, where, in relation to landlords, that they can be forced to write down. And I'd like to see more proactive pro-business initiatives being taken. You have the SBCI there, the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland, that has money for nothing, 2 billion in funds, that they managed to get 120 million out. Those funds should be redeployed to buy debt off banks, so that, as opposed to paying back 50,000 over 5 years, that suddenly you're paying that back out over 20 years. So there's a number of kind of initiatives that can be undertaken by the powers that be that would make a real substantial difference to business when they reopen. And look, in the famous words of Abraham Lincoln, this too will pass. But my concern is not when we open, but what will happen when we open.
Yeah. Joe, you're on mute, Joe.
One of the concerns that I have is who's going to pay all this money back? That's it. All these grants and investments and everything that is in the billions. I'm looking at my 4-year-old daughter and I'm going to go, you're going to be paying for all this. So,
again, I think a positive news story there is you have the reopening and resilience fund from the European Union. That's a 600 billion fund. I'd like to see the Irish government put out a more proactive story saying, look, under this, the grants available, the low cost loans, money has never been cheaper. To take on a bold initiative and come back to Simon's kind of, point there about being granular, to be able to identify certain sectors, to identify the debt profile, to be able to say, look, if AIB have a debt exposure to pubs of 1 billion, we're going to buy that through the SBCI, and instead of paying rates of 6.5%, 7%, that we'll relend the money out at 2% over a longer period, to give businesses a real, like that, as opposed to grants, is given a real benefit to your bottom line, to your working capital, and giving you a chance to actually survive.
To do it, okay. Gentlemen, if people want to reach out to your organisation or support you in any way, Conor, where can people find yourself or the organisation?
So if people want to find us, they can go to the/great/reopening.com and you can find everything you need to know there.
Okay. And Brian, yourself?
SaveIrishPubs.ie.
SaveIrishPubs.ie. Perfect. And thank you, gentlemen, for coming on to the show. Thank you. Simon, what do you think?
It was interesting. In both halves of the show, the term "this too shall pass" came up both times. And it will, like everything passes. I guess my big concern is for those people who don't have, the mindset to get through this. I think, we really, really need to support those people who just are feeling a bit fragile and frail right now. I think that's the key thing. I mean, we'll get through this, but yeah, this is a challenge. And I think, coming in out of winter and into spring, I think people are expecting everything to be opened. I don't think it is. So we just need to really, really, and I think this show and this channel, really, it's about the community, so that's what came out of it for me.
It is. And it's as you said, that it's, this shall pass, but a lot of people out there are feeling it. And the one thing that I wish would open, and the one thing that, I think needs to open is our schools. I think out of everything, that's the first, and that has to be priority. Our school up the road, wonderful, no cases, why is it closed? That's, the question that I'm asking and other people are asking. But until next week, look, if anybody wants to find myself and Simon, they can go to dublinsouthfm.com/business-I, and you'll find all our previous shows in there. And there's links to myself and Simon's websites in there as well if you want to connect. And look, until next week, be safe and God bless.
Sponsored by the Dún Laoghaire Rathdown Local Enterprise Office. You're listening to Business Eye on Dublin South FM.